Like an exercise I'll do with my students when I'm teaching them phrasal verbs is I'll give them two texts and they're the same, except one uses phrasal verbs and the other one doesn't. And I say, oh, which one sounds more natural to you? And they usually say the one that doesn't have phrasal verbs because they don't know the phrasal verbs. But I'm like, no, actually.
Welcome back to the fifth and final episode of the Tutor's Take by the PaperTrue studio. And for our new listeners, welcome to the podcast. I'm Chetna, your host. In this episode, I talk to Lizzie, who goes by English with Lizzie Jane on Instagram. She's been teaching English for over 3 years now and has taught on diverse mediums, and she's had students from all over the world. Lizzie and I had a wonderful time chatting about her teaching story. We talk about what she's learned over the years, how she got into creating online resources about language learning, her experience with various platforms, and much more. As usual, we'll link you to her profile after the episode so you can go check out her cool stuff. But for now, we hope you tune into the episode and enjoy it. See you there. Okay, first, how did you get into teaching?
So I studied French translation and interpreting at university. I also studied a little bit of Spanish as well, but more French. I studied Spanish for the first year and then and then what was the first kind of thing I did? I studied abroad in France and Belgium in my third year of university, and while I was there I started teaching a Syrian refugee who was living in the UK. I taught him online via Skype. Not that much. I did it for like a month. It was a very short period of time. But that was like a voluntary thing. It wasn't paid. And I really enjoyed that. And I obviously I didn't really have any experience teaching English. But I just did that. So I was quite interested in it then. And then in my final year of university, I did a TESOL course, which is like teaching English to students of other languages. And I really enjoyed that as well. And I studied linguistics alongside that too. But that wasn't like an official teaching qualification. So when I graduated, I didn't really know what I was doing. And so I did a TEFL course, an online TEFL course. And then, I had a year where I was just doing that, teaching online. And then I moved to Vietnam in 2018, end of 2018, to teach English there. So, yeah.
Oh, that sounds quite adventurous so far. So you began teaching online?
I actually began online, yeah. So after I got my TEFL course, I was teaching for a Chinese company online. I was teaching children, and it was my first time ever sort of doing that.
Okay.
And that was just part-time. I was working in a cafe actually, the rest of the time. So I was doing that, and then I actually planned to go to France again and teach English there. But then they gave me a school that was in like a not very good location. It was kind of out in the countryside, and I didn't want to do that. I really wanted to be in the city. So I turned it down and I decided to go to Vietnam instead. So it was quite last minute decision. And I didn't find a job. I didn't have a job before I went to Vietnam. I went there, didn't have a job, and I just found a job once I got there.
Wow.
So it took me like a few months to get a job that I actually liked and like a good job. But yeah, once I found some good jobs, I was working in public schools and like language centers, a mixture of everything really.
Okay. All right. Did you know any Vietnamese before you went there?
No, I still don't really know any Vietnamese.
I'm very curious.
I'm very curious as to how that works. How do you teach English as a language to people who speak a language that the teacher doesn't know? I'm very curious about that.
It's interesting because actually a lot of the students I was teaching were really young as well, so they didn't know any English. So it's like I was teaching like 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, like babies. They would be like crawling around the class. So cute. But yeah, it's just a lot of TPR. Just a lot of TPR, repetition, using flashcards, so showing them like something visual, like I don't know, a flashcard with like an apple and just being like apple, 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 and then they repeat, and then apple, and then you show them something else, and then you go back to the apple, and it's just using that method to teach the young children.
Right.
And kind of the same with the older children. When I was teaching in high schools, it was kind of the same. So say we'd do a lesson on free time activities or something like this. And the question would be vocabulary at the beginning, so flashcards or PowerPoints. So just getting them to repeat after you, playing games like memory games to get them to recognize and remember the vocabulary. And then after that, it would be like a question and an answer maybe, and then they repeat the question and the answer, maybe one grammar concept. So in one lesson you wouldn't actually teach them very much, and it would just be getting them to like repeat after you. But I think especially with children, and especially when they don't know the language, it's just about being really energetic and making sure it's fun and making sure they have something visual as well, to help them understand. But
Yeah, that's interesting. TPR, for our listeners who don't know, is, I believe, total physical response, right?
I was like, when you started saying, I was like, what does it stand for again?
Total physical response.
So thank you.
So I believe it involves you doing actions that are observable within a small space, like stand up and you stand up, sit down and you sit down, open the window and you open the window, and things like that, right?
Exactly. So using lots of hand gestures and or facial expressions, a mixture of both. Even like if you're teaching shapes, like triangle, 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 like that. And it's just just giving them an action with the word. And I'm one of those people as well, like I use my hands a lot when I'm talking. So I think sometimes I'm doing TPR without like meaning to. I do it naturally.
It helps. It helps. Maybe not for the people on Spotify, but for the people on YouTube, it's quite
That's true.
effective. So in the classroom in Vietnam, are you with another person who can bridge the gap between the two languages better, or what happens when you're alone, if you're alone in the class?
So there was supposed to always be a Vietnamese speaking teaching assistant. That didn't always happen. Often they just didn't appear to the lesson, so it was just me by myself. But even when they were there, they often didn't really have to intervene that much. The thing that they helped with more was like classroom management, because when I was teaching in public schools, I was teaching like 50 to 60 students in a lesson sometimes. So it was big classrooms, and sometimes they're quite noisy. So the teaching assistant would be there more to kind of just tell them to be quiet. But yeah, like sometimes if they really didn't understand, the teaching assistant would then give them an explanation in Vietnamese. But when they weren't there, you just had, I mean, I never really had, I'm trying to think if I ever had a issue where they really didn't understand. I think if I ever do or did, I just would try and explain things in as many different ways as possible. Until they did. And then trying to simplify things and break it down if they didn't understand, and eventually so if I had to spend longer, I guess sometimes I'd have to spend longer on one topic or one grammar concept than I thought I was gonna, because maybe they didn't understand, and that's okay. And that still happens, I guess. So it's just breaking things down and making it a little bit more simple for the student.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Since physical activity plays so much of an important role in your teaching philosophy and techniques, how does that translate when you teach online, where you don't have the physical proximity to gesticulate as much as you would like to, perhaps?
Yeah, it's difficult for sure. I have like a love-hate relationship with teaching online. Like there's parts of it that I really enjoy. I mean, I love how I can now teach people from all over the world. I wouldn't be able to do that in person. But yeah, I do find that difficult. What I would say is most of my students now online are adults. Therefore, they need less of like a physical kind of they don't need as much TPR. They also are quite happy to sit and they can focus for an hour or longer online, just having a discussion. Whereas obviously younger students, they can't do that. They get bored, they get restless. So it's actually not too difficult now, as most of my students are adults. But yeah, when I have taught children online, it is quite difficult. It is. I use a lot of songs and games and things online to try and make it fun and try and like make the lesson a little bit different. But yeah, I do find it quite difficult at times, and I do sometimes miss teaching in person.
Yeah, I'm curious. The idea of getting a student's attention online sounds really overwhelming to me at the moment, because I've never taught online. How have you found yourself navigating this? How do you catch your students' attention, especially the younger ones?
I find it, I'm not gonna lie, I find it really difficult. I find it really hard, and it's one thing that I don't miss so much about teaching children online, because as I said, mostly I teach adults now. But I would just have a lot of like props, a lot of toys. I think it's hard. Like I think if you have a lot of energy and you're giving a lot of energy, like the students pick up on that, and that makes the lesson work really well. But it's a lot harder, it's a lot more difficult to do that online. You have to try even harder. But yeah, songs, as I said, like I would just usually start the lesson with a song, and then if they look like they're getting a bit bored or restless, then I'll maybe be like, right, we're gonna sing another song now. or we're gonna play another game, giving them rewards and things like they can see. Like I would draw little stars for them under their names as like a sort of reward or prize if they did something well. But it's really difficult. It's really difficult. And I know teachers who teach children online like full time, and I honestly don't think I could do that. It's just really exhausting, and it's really difficult to just like have their attention the whole time. So yeah, it's hard. So if anyone has any tips, then I wanna know them.
I'm sure we'll all find our way soon. This is even, I mean, the the whole landscape of teaching online is necessitated by the world we live in. And that brings me to my next question. You've taught online before this world and now. Do you see any difference? How has online teaching as an idea changed in the last few years?
It's an interesting one. I don't know if it's changed like massive. I think there's always going to be a need for online teaching, and there always was. What I would say is there's probably more need for it now, which is great for me. But yeah, like I don't know, because I kind of stopped teaching online for a period of time. So when I was living in Vietnam, I didn't teach online so much, and then I started again during COVID. So it was a little bit of time in between like teaching online before I went away and then coming back, and that's the difference. I don't know like if it's changed massively apart from just like more demand. I don't know though, I have noticed more like and I guess more demand. I've noticed more online teaching companies. I see much more now. I see like a lot of teachers becoming self-employed and like setting up their own business with it, that's becoming more and more common. That's what I've done. So yeah, and the good thing is, I guess people have realized that they don't need to be physically somewhere to learn a language. I guess it's created more opportunities for people as well, because, you know, if you want to learn English and you want to be taught by, not that you have to be taught by a native speaker, but if you want to be taught by a native speaker, you want to communicate with a native speaker, it is much easier now because there are more people teaching online than before. So yeah, I guess just more demand.
Yeah, there's definitely more demand, and if there are more people teaching online, I assume that the network of or the community of teachers would also grow. I remember last week when we chatted, you were talking about the importance of connecting with other teachers as a support
Yeah.
system for yourself. Could you maybe elaborate a bit more on that?
Sure. So I started my like English with Lizzie Jane. I started that in January. And when I started, like, I didn't have any advice from anyone else. I wasn't interacting with any other teachers. I set it up by myself. I'm not that experienced because I'm only 25. I've only been teaching since 2018. So yeah, it was kind of just like, it was quite overwhelming. And yeah, like I would teach my first classes, I set up group lessons, and I didn't really have anyone to ask advice about it or anything like this. And then through my Instagram page, I don't even know how how these connections were kind of made, but just kind of started interacting with other English teachers on who also have Instagram pages and also teach private lessons. And then I decided to do a live with them all. I wanted to do a live with them all, but I also wanted to make a group chat where we could all communicate. So I just made a group chat and like added like the teachers, which I kind of knew. Some of them all knew each other as well. And then I asked if they wanted to do a live, and we did a live. And that was fun. And then since then we've kind of just been chatting in that like every day, and we'll just ask each other advice about how much we're charging students for certain things. One of the teachers in the chat, she's a professional IELTS teacher. She's an IELTS trainer and expert, so if any of our students are studying for the IELTS exam, we can ask her some advice and questions they might have. I don't know what else, like advice about types of lessons. If we have a student that is asking something really specific and we're unsure, then we ask each other about that. Also, if we have any bad experiences with our Instagram or students, we can sort of talk about that. And it's just nice to have support, because in another job, when I was teaching in schools and language centers, for example, or in any other job where you're working with other people, you'd have that support, you'd be able to give each other advice or even just joke about things, and it's just really helpful to have that. So it's really nice. And yeah, I'm hoping I can like add more teachers to it as time goes on. It'll be like our little, it's like our little staff room. For us.
That
It's
sounds
nice.
lovely. That sounds lovely.
Yeah.
And it seems like an especially important thing to do because we're all so separate. We all have our own individual teaching practices in different corners of the world, and it's difficult to be in a larger. That's good.
And also because of like developing yourself as well, like you learn so much from other people. So me and one of the other teachers, she's got about the same amount of experience as me, the same number of years experience as me anyway, but some of the teachers on there have like over 12-15 like years experience. They're much older than me, obviously. They didn't start teaching when they were 5. But yeah, so it's really nice to hear about their experience and learn from them as well. It's really beneficial for me, so it's win-win. It's good.
How did you decide that you wanted to start English with Lizzie Jane? How do you go from teaching to creating content on like a larger, more broader scale where you will encounter a variety of learners?
So I actually need to it's actually thanks to like one person. Or not just one person, but I was teaching on Cambly. I don't know if you know Cambly. It's like
I
an
think I've heard of
American
it.
it's like an American teaching application. But it's mostly conversation based. So you don't have to have I don't actually have to have a teaching qualification to teach on Cambly. So I was doing that like alongside another online company. And it became quite like trendy for a lot of students to set up YouTube channels where they post their conversations with their Cambly tutors. And some of these YouTubers were getting like a lot of views, a lot of subscribers. Because I think other English learners really find it beneficial to go on YouTube and watch a conversation that an English learner was having with a native speaker and just sort of, I don't know, compare it. I think it was nice for them to compare themselves to the level of the English learner, or kind of to see how a conversation would go, to get some vocabulary language. So yeah, so a couple of my students had their YouTube channels and they were posting our conversations on YouTube, and some of these were getting like a lot of views. So and I knew they'd posted these videos, but then all of a sudden on Cambly my schedule was like really full, and I was getting like hundreds of messages a week being like, when are you opening your schedule, because of these YouTube videos. So that was thanks to those those students who posted our conversations. So then I realized I was in quite high demand from these people coming from the YouTube channel, but I was not actually receiving very much money, like working for this company. And I thought, yeah, I'm just gonna try and set up my own thing. But I didn't know, I wanted to set up my website and teach private lessons. I didn't know how to kind of advertise that. So I just decided to do it through Instagram. So yeah, made my Instagram page. I think I made it like at the end of December, but I didn't really start posting much till like January, February.
So it's been less than a year.
Yeah, it's been less than a year.
That's amazing.
It grew really fast. And what I did first was I was like, how will people follow me? And I went on my student who's a YouTuber, went on his Instagram and went on people that followed him and just followed a few of them, because I thought, they might have seen the videos and then they'll kind of know who I am and then they might spread the word kind of thing. So I did that, and I remember when I got 1,000 followers, I was like, oh my god. Wow, I didn't expect this. And then it just grew really fast after that. And yeah, and I enjoyed creating content as well. And now for Cambly, the teaching company that I mentioned, they've now contacted me, and I now create some videos for their YouTube channel, and also I do like live lessons on their YouTube. So it's actually worked out. It's kind of through Cambly in a way, things have happened. So that's nice.
It's a nice full circle.
A nice full circle, exactly. But I really enjoy it. I enjoy creating the content. I enjoy teaching lessons, and I'm enjoying working for myself as well. So it's nice.
Yeah, and I noticed a lot of content in your Instagram, on your Instagram page, is about conversations and idioms and like phrases that that we use in parlance but wouldn't think to teach in a grammar class, which is very, very cool.
Yeah. That's the kind of content which I enjoy. Like I kind of teach in my lessons. It's the same kind of thing. It depends what the student wants. My lessons are very personal. They're very like tailored to what the student wants and needs. So usually I'll meet a student first and sort of find out what their goals are. And then after that, I kind of tell them what we will cover in the lesson. So it depends. It varies from student to student. But most of my students that do come to me, they come through my Instagram. So they follow me on Instagram because they like that content, which is everyday English vocabulary, like some slang words, idioms, phrasal verbs. So then that's kind of what they want to learn in our lessons, and that's great for me because that's what I enjoy teaching.
So with applications like Cambly, do you get to decide the curriculum, or do you have to follow something that they come up with?
So with Cambly, no. If you're a teacher on Cambly, it's mostly conversation based. So a lot of the time it's just students having a chat, a general chat conversation with the teacher. What I'd say is every student's different. So some students come and say, I want you to teach me something today. So yeah, you kind of just do whatever you want. So it was quite good because Cambly was kind of an introduction, a way for me to kind of start sourcing my own materials, coming up with my own lessons, and being sort of more independent with my teaching. So when I started teaching lessons privately, I'd kind of done it before because of Cambly. So yeah, but with other applications that I've or other online teaching companies that I've worked for, it's always been like following a curriculum, and mostly I've been teaching children. So like Wales English or say ABC, Palfish. I've worked for loads. Loads of online companies.
That's a lot of kind of teaching you get on, like you get to explore in just a few short years. That's brilliant. But you also like learning languages. Do you still learn languages? Is that
Do you know what? Like I'm so not motivated at the moment. It's really bad. What I would say, if I'm going to be honest, I find it really hard to feel motivated to learn a language if I'm not, like, if I don't have a need to. So for example, like obviously when I was at university, I studied languages and I was doing it all the time. And then last year I lived in Spain for 4 months, and I picked up my Spanish again, and I studied every day, and I was really disciplined because I was living in the country and I had a need to study and I was around the language. But since I've come back, and yeah, I just haven't really been concentrating on it. I've also been really busy, but that is not an excuse at all. So yeah, like I love speaking languages though, so I do need to schedule more time. And I mean, some of my students are French and Spanish, or they are living in Spanish speaking countries, so I kind of get a bit of language practice through them. I mean, they're learning English, so not really, but maybe they don't know the word for something, so they can talk a little bit in Spanish or French with me, and it kind of, it keeps that part of my brain like activated a little bit. But yeah, now after this podcast, I'm gonna be like, right, I'm gonna get back to my French and Spanish.
No, I completely understand what you mean. I experienced that as a learner as well. I am also interested in, I know I have a very elementary understanding of French and an even more basic understanding of Spanish. I have no need to study either language at the moment, but I'm just doing it because I'm interested. And that actually works out well for me because it removes the pressure of having to use the language at some point. I can take it in my own speed, but that's a personal thing.
Sure.
So is there, well, at some point I wanted to ask you about what tips you had for students to start practicing the language outside the classroom, because you know how they tell us that 80% of language learning is practice and 20% is teaching. So just what do you as a teacher do to get that 80% going?
I set my students homework, and a lot of them don't do it. But it's optional. Like, I don't get annoyed with them if they don't do the homework, because it's for them, it's not for me. But usually what I'll do is, if we are focusing on a particular topic, I'll give them like a writing task or grammar task, or maybe something related to vocabulary. It just depends on, it's always related to whatever topic we've been studying, so that then because usually some of my students study with me like 4 times a week, but some of them are just once a week, so they're not going to see me for a week. So I give them the homework so that they can like, you know, recap that. So giving them homework, but also telling them like, you know, to, if they learn new vocabulary, to try and use that during that week. So I don't know, they're not necessarily going to do that, but trying to do that. Sometimes as well, I always just encourage my students to do things that they enjoy in their native language, in English. So like, I mean, it's something that's said all the time, but if they're interested in a particular topic, like philosophy or something, then listening to like podcasts about philosophy in English, or if they enjoy doing yoga, then going on YouTube and doing a yoga class in English, or like an exercise class in English. Yeah, like just trying to do something that they already enjoy in their native language but in English. And I try and do that with some of my students who really enjoy lessons like that as well. I usually try and find out in our first meeting like what they are interested in, and then I'll try to like make a lot of the lessons about that, because they're more motivated. So like I have a student who studied in Manchester for like 3 months, and she absolutely loves Manchester now, and she always talks about her time there. And then I found like a really interesting lesson the other day, which was like an article all about diversity in Manchester, and it had loads of really good like words and phrasal verbs and idioms in it. So then I brought that to the lesson, because I thought, okay, this is something that she's interested in, like she's interested in that place, she liked being there, therefore she'll be more like into the lesson and more motivated. Sorry, I'm now going off topic, this is not even what you asked, but
but it's an amazing idea to like take it to so specific as to explore the dialect of a language. Would it qualify as a dialect? Okay, Manchester English.
Mancunian.
Mancunian, I think it is.
Mancunian, that's
Mancunian?
it.
Yeah, no, but that's a really good place to start, I'd imagine. Like if your student has picked it up, they might also be interested in seeing how it differs from Englishes from other places around the country.
Yeah,
it's
true.
Really cool.
And it's just finding stuff that they're interested in. So, and then I had another student who he really likes like British rap artists and British rap music. And then I was like on a walk, and there's a British rap artist called Dave. I don't know if you heard of him. By the way, I was listening to like his album. It's like a newish album. I was listening to one of his songs, and I was like, oh my goodness, there's so much like good vocabulary in here that my students won't know. And so I went to the lesson, and he didn't actually know who this guy was, even though he enjoys this kind of music. So I sent him the song, and I said, right, listen to this song, and then we're going to discuss it in our lesson. So, and then he, you know, and then he was interested in it because he likes that kind of music. So then it's just like telling my students to try and like do this in their free time as well, so outside the lesson. So do things like this, so search for things that they're interested in, and yeah, I just think it motivates them more. It does for me anyway.
No, but I really, that's brilliant. The fact that the idea of you taking the effort to direct your students to resources that they might enjoy is really nice. Does your own language learning experience sort of guide you when you teach, or when you decide how you want to teach?
A little bit. I definitely think if you study other languages, you're going to be better at teaching a language, because you understand like the difficulties that are faced, you understand how frustrating it can be. So I think that that's guided me in the sense that like it's made me quite like I'm more understanding towards my students and their struggles, and I guess you're just more understanding and aware of language and how language works in general. So that's definitely good. But yeah, I would say so. I would say it does. Like, I think It's hard because everybody learns in a different way, and do you know what I mean, our minds all work a little bit differently, but I do definitely sort of teach my students in the way that I would want to be taught. I try and adapt it to their needs as well, as I said, but definitely, yeah, there's definitely an element of like the way that I would learn and the way that I would want to be taught is the way that I teach. I guess a lot of teachers probably do that. So I don't have like a set structure to my lessons, so like, as I said, it depends on the student and all my lessons are different. And I'm not one of those teachers who's like when I plan my lessons, it's not like the official structure that you technically like or necessarily should like follow with teaching. But I guess there is some sort of structure. Subconsciously there is a little bit, like usually I'll just like start the lesson with like a slight warm-up, which would just be like discussing stuff. Usually we'll go over like any homework and things that they've studied. I'll always give my students time to like ask any questions as well, and I think that's really important, which is something that I find beneficial when learning other languages. I was doing Spanish lessons online, and the teacher would always start the lesson like asking us if we had any questions or if we'd seen any vocabulary that week that we didn't understand. And that was always really beneficial, not also because it was a group lesson. So sometimes other students would ask questions and then I would learn from that. And yeah, so I try and do that with my students. Like I'll give them a chance to ask any questions if they were watching like a TV program and they used an idiom or a phrasal verb and they didn't understand, then I'll give them a chance to ask about anything they've come across, because I find that beneficial for me. And that's usually how my lessons start, and then
And you just take it from there.
Take it from there, yeah.
Have you over the years begun like do you sort of anticipate where a student might be facing problems when you start teaching them and sort of prepare for it? Like what kind of common I don't want to call this a mistake as much as how do I phrase this?
What can you ask the question again? Again? He's Gwen.
What? No, I was asking because you've been teaching for so many years and you've been teaching people from all over the world. Do you sort of begin to anticipate what kind of what particular students might face issues with?
Definitely. Not to put students in boxes either, because every student's different, but also depending on where students are from does sometimes plays a part in it. Like you know, a lot of my students from some Asian countries like Japan struggle with certain sounds, like the L and R sound, but not every student, because some of my students they don't, but it's very common that they do. So I'm sort of aware that when I have a new student from Japan, for example, that might be something we will focus on in the lessons, maybe. Also, a lot of my Brazilian students, so Portuguese speakers, they struggle with prepositions. I mean, everyone struggles with prepositions, right? But they often make a lot of mistakes with like to and for and of. Not always, but I found that to be very common. Another thing that a lot of my students make mistakes with, a lot of my French students, Spanish students, is make and do. So they don't know when to use make and when to use do. And you know, it's just all these kind of different students from different countries seem to have different things that they struggle with, and then a lot of students have the same things, because there are some things in English that are hard for everyone or difficult for everyone. So yeah, I do find that. And what I've made is I have this kind of mixed grammar document that I made for some of my first students to kind of review things that they had been finding difficult. And so now what I do when I get a new student, I ask them, you know, do you want homework? Do you struggle with any grammar in English? And if they say, yeah, I want homework, and yeah, I struggle with some grammar, usually after our first lesson, I'll send them this document now, because it's got a good mixture of things. And then it's a good indication for me to see, okay, they're okay with that. Okay, they don't understand that. They don't understand that. And often it's the same things that students find difficult. I mean, pretty much all my students struggle with phrasal verbs. I don't think I've ever had a student who is confident with phrasal verbs. So yeah, that's something that is taught a lot as well. It's a very common thing.
I did notice a lot of material about phrasal verbs when we were doing our research for the podcast. So much.
Yeah, so much. Phrasal verbs is like my life now.
I don't think
I
I'd ever learned phrasal verbs formally.
Yeah, I mean, I think you do. I think it's some grammar books, some English books. You know, like they're like English vocabulary and use books. You've seen them. You heard of them? I don't know who makes them. I don't know what. This isn't good. It's called like English vocabulary and use. I'm sure like those books teach phrasal verbs. But yeah, like it's just a sort of thing that you could learn forever because there are so many, and they have a lot of them have like more than one function, more than one meaning. So but it's a really fun thing to learn, and it's important to learn because, and I say this all the time to my students, but it's important to learn because when native speakers are talking, they use phrasal verbs more than they use the other verb in place of the phrasal verb. Like an exercise I'll do with my students when I'm teaching them phrasal verbs is I'll give them two texts and they're the same, except one uses phrasal verbs and the other one doesn't. And I say, oh, which one sounds more natural to you? And they usually say the one that doesn't have phrasal verbs because they don't know the phrasal verbs. But I'm like, no, actually, the one with phrasal verbs sounds more natural to me as a native English speaker. That's the one that sounds more natural to me because that's how we would talk. So it kind of shows them that actually it is important to learn these, because if you are going to talk to people from English speaking countries, they will be using phrasal verbs and you're going to be so confused. But what I would say, when you see a phrasal verb by itself, it's like, I have no idea what that means. But then when you see it in context, it is easier to kind of make sense of it. Yeah.
Yeah, this is something this is a recurring question in this podcast. I've been asking all the teachers what they do to bridge the gap between the things. As you said, if a student whose only exposure to English is your classroom, or who just has a very limited exposure to English in general, is not able to recognize what's natural and what isn't, how much effort needs to be put in sort of exposing them to the way a native speaker speaks? Because even though if you're a native speaker, the way you speak in a language is going to be controlled for the classroom, right? So I was just, how do you bridge that gap?
What I would say is that isn't the most important thing, first of all.
Okay.
For someone when they're learning a language. For me, the most important thing is communication, and also it can be difficult because the way I talk isn't going to be necessarily natural for someone who lives in the United States, and
That's
the way
true.
that they talk is not necessarily going to be natural for someone who lives in I don't know, another English speaking. There's so many, like
Australia.
English is spoken. Yeah, Australia.
We speak English. India speaks
Yeah,
English.
exactly. In India, in some African countries, like there are so many countries where English is a native language. And therefore, that's why I have a problem with people saying as well, like, I want to speak, and I posted about this on my Instagram last week. But when people say, I want to speak English like a native speaker, I want to speak English like you, I want to speak English like a native speaker. And I'm like, okay, well, usually when they say native speaker, they often mean like British or American, and they forget about all these other countries where English is spoken as a native language. So I have a little bit, even though I use the term native speaker, but when people say this, often they just mean British or American. Yeah. And also because even if English isn't spoken in a country as a native language, English is such a global language now, that it takes so many different forms. Like it's you can't just say like it's spoken this way and this way and this way and that's it. And so it's more about being a language. Sorry, I'm like, how do I word this? It's more about like being able to communicate and understand each other and using English as a means to do that. So I don't think it's I don't think it's like the most important thing for students to be able to speak like a native speaker or seem like and be able to speak naturally, but a lot of students do, they want, so I have a lot of students at the same time who are like, okay, I'm coming to the UK to work or to study, and I want to be able to have a conversation with people who live in the UK, and I want to sound natural to them. That's fair. So for those students, and if that's the case, I think then listening to podcasts of people in the UK, watching UK like British TV programs and series. So I think it depends on like what your purpose is, like why you want to understand English naturally, like which country you want to like speak like, because am I back?
Yeah.
Okay, fab. When did I cut out?
Which country you want to speak like?
Yeah, which doesn't actually make sense. We should cut out before then.
It's like a country.
Love it. Wednesday morning I can't speak English. Which yeah, if you want to speak like the people in that particular country, and that is okay. But I think when people just say like, I want to understand natural English, I want to speak English like a native, then that is quite confusing. I find that goal quite confusing. But yeah, if you're like, okay, I'm coming to the UK, I want to understand how people communicate in the UK, and that's what I teach. So on my Instagram, a lot of my vocabulary that I'm teaching, idioms, slang words, phrasal verbs and things, phrasal verbs not so much, but some of them, a lot of it, that's how I speak, that's how British people are speaking. Like a lot of my students will comment and be like, is this an American idiom? And I'm like, I don't know, I'll need to check. Like, so, and I say that to my students. I'm like, okay, like I am from the UK, I'm gonna teach, a lot of what I teach can be used everywhere, but a lot of it is how British speakers speak. And I'm not saying that that's correct English, or that's the most natural way to speak English. That's just how I speak English, and that's what I'm teaching.
I'm really glad you brought this conversation up, because it's something that other teachers have brought up as well, and it's something that this is an idea that's very close to me as well, because
Okay.
Because I've been saying this for the past couple of episodes as well. It's really debatable to think about whether, for example, India and non-quote Western countries qualify as English-speaking countries or not. So it's really important to have this conversation generally. And do you see this conversation growing in classrooms, in the teaching community in general? And how does it take shape in the classroom when you actually introduce English as this language that is no longer, if it ever was, this singular monolithic experience?
I think it's a conversation that's being had more and more, which is great. And I think a lot of people still don't really understand it. I just remembered something that I saw the other day that really angered me. It really angered me. I was on Facebook, and there's an ad for an advertisement for italki. I don't know if you've seen the ad. I see this ad for everywhere. But it's an advert for italki, and the teacher who's talking on the advert, she has an accent, so she's obviously she has an accent that's I don't know, I don't actually know which country she's from. Her English is perfect, like she's speaking in perfect English, but her accent, from her accent you can tell she's not a native English speaker, as in she's not from Australia, America, UK, Ireland. Like I'm not sure, she might be from like another European country, not entirely sure. But a lot of the comments are like, this is a really bad advertisement. Who wants to learn English from someone who's not actually from an English speaking country? And all of these comments and these people, and it's just ridiculous because it's like she I don't know how much experience this girl has, first of all, so I can't vouch for her, but she is probably an experienced English teacher. She's speaking English perfectly, and it's just so like closed-minded to think that if you don't sound like British or American or Australian or Irish, then that says like how much experience you have as a teacher. And also a lot of my students as well, they say, oh, I want to lose my accent, I don't want to. And I have that in my classes a lot, and one of the first things a lot of my students say is, I want to lose my accent. How do I lose my accent? I want to sound like you, or I want to sound American. And I'm like, okay, well, if you really want that, that's okay, but what are your reasons behind that? Like, you might want to sound American just because you like the sound of it, and that's okay. And then therefore, I don't know, watch American series, listen to American podcasts. Like, you need to listen to it and copy it. But if you're doing it for the wrong reasons, I find a lot of my learners say, when I speak with this accent, people don't take me seriously. When I speak with this accent, people assume that I'm stupid or I don't have a good level of English, even if their English is like advanced. So yeah, I hate that. And it's something that is being spoken about more, and I just try to explain to my students again and again and again, like, just speak with whatever accent you want. Like, your accent's not important. It's about being understood. It's about being able to communicate and using English to communicate, and it's a global language. And yeah, it is frustrating for a lot of people. I've had students who are from India who are pretty much fluent, I would say, in English. I mean, everyone views fluency differently, but I would say they're fluent. But they found that in a business context, in the workplace, people haven't taken them seriously, or haven't listened to them as much because because of their accent, and because people think, oh, their English isn't very good, even though their English is perfect. And they've really struggled with that. And it's no longer just about letting my students know that, though. It's also about like other people, because I think a lot of people commenting on this post, on this advertisement, they weren't teachers, they weren't students. I think they were just general public thinking, oh, you have to learn English from an English person. And it's just, yeah, I think, but yeah, the conversation is being had about this a lot more, and I think it is getting better, and people are realizing that English is not just a language from the West and from England or the United States. Yeah.
Well,
have you had any experiences like this where, I don't know, you haven't been taken seriously, or you felt that people have judged you because of an accent, or because of anything like this?
well, not at the moment, because I have been in India for a really long time, and so I think this will happen when I move abroad. For example, like the whole idea of giving this is the first time I've heard that test being abbreviated from you. How did you say it?
What was it?
The test. I keep forgetting what the full form of that test is.
italki.
No, not italki.
IELTS.
IELTS. Oh yeah,
Sorry,
it is IELTS phonetically. It never occurred to me to say it as a word. This is the first time I heard it.
Like IELTS?
Yeah, we usually just like, so far I've just heard IELTS and
it's
never
faster
heard it as a verb word.
It's a word.
No, so even though a lot of people in India know English fluently, to get out of the country to study in the UK and in many other places, we have to give the IELTS. The test.
The test. Yeah. That's true.
So I personally think that's a bit elitist. This is completely off topic. This has nothing to do with the podcast.
This is a whole other episode.
Yeah, this is a whole
I'll come
other
back.
podcast.
Yeah.
So I think it depends. I've personally not had any experience, but I have seen a lot of people have this experience in the workplace and just generally. And the thing is, here of all places, that shouldn't matter, because if you know, because here's the thing: most of us grow up at least being bilingual or trilingual. That's the level of linguistic diversity we have in this country. So it's very rare that you find someone who knows only one language. It's the ability to learn languages in us seems to be innate. So I mean, yeah, we recognize that English is becoming an increasingly important language, but that conversation has to be had in particular context.
Yeah. And there's that thing you say as well, though. A lot of the time, the people that are judging someone for their accent or for their level of English can only speak one language themselves anyway. They can only speak English. And that's something I always say when someone is, I mean, this doesn't happen all the time. Most people are patient and understanding when someone is speaking another language, but you will get people who do judge you and who are impatient with you. Because of your accent or because you're not 100% accurate when you're speaking English. But these people are always people who've never studied another language. Because if someone studied another language, then they understand the difficulties, so they wouldn't judge you. Yeah. So yeah, it's annoying.
It's annoying. Let's just leave it at that. And I think
we could carry on this rant forever.
Yeah. This requires a whole different podcast series just ranting about about the power the English language has in our world today.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But if it's important to you, learn it, go ahead, go on your own language learning journey at your own pace. And I think this is a good place to end the podcast.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Thank you, Lizzie. It was wonderful chatting with you. This has been amazing.
Thank you so much for having me on. I've had lots of fun, and I hope the connection problems at the beginning weren't too much of an issue when you watch.
I hope not. I'll probably find out once I begin to edit this.
Thank you for tuning into the episode. Talking to Lizzie has made me think about a lot of these ideas very closely, and we hope they resonated with you too. As a language learner, I absolutely understand where she's coming from and often find myself using many of these techniques and tricks that we discussed in the episode. What about you? Write to us with your thoughts. As you know, our inbox is always open. You can follow Lizzie's content on her Instagram channel at the rate English with Lizzie Jane, where you can find cool grammar tips, expressions, idioms, phrasal verbs, and much more. We've put a link to her profile in the description. As I said earlier, the Tutor Stake mini-series is coming to an end. As people who work with language every day, it has been a privilege and an enriching experience for us to talk to teachers from around the world and understand their perspectives on working with language. It's given us many things to ponder over, ideas to navigate, and a better understanding of what we can do as creators who make language resources. We could not have done this without the wonderful teachers who agreed to chat with us, and we could not have done this without you, our listeners, who continue to engage with these ideas and have supported us all the way. A big thank you to you all. We hope you enjoyed being on this journey with us. In the meantime, you can head over to our social media channels or our resource center to browse our articles, checklists, infographics, and of course, the older podcast episodes. We definitely hope to be back with more episodes that delve deeper into the various facets of the English language. Thank you for listening to the Tutor's Take. We hope to see you again very, very soon. Until then, goodbye and take care.